Let's go today. Inspire your troops today. Inspire your troops today.
If you guys want to be remembered forever, this is how you do it.
All right. We win the game. This is a legendary defense. Put an exclamation point on your work.
It's over, folks. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won the Super Bowl for a sixth-time unprecedented.
It's time now for Black and Gold Central Radio, exclusively on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Let's get those terrible towels waving. And now your host, Mike Batista.
Greetings, Yinzers and non-Yinzers alike. Welcome to Black and Gold Central Radio here on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. We're going to have a great show today. We have BJ Kissel, a Bleacher Report NFL featured columnist. He is a league-wide NFL featured columnist on Bleacher Report, and he's also written for Arrowhead Pride, Kansas City Chiefs website. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Steelers preseason game Saturday night at Heinz Field against the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to talk about 5 studs and duds from the Steelers preseason debacle on Monday night in Washington, D.C. Black and Gold Central is sponsored by Onnit. Vitamins and supplements, lots of good vitamins and supplements there. That's ONNIT.com. And Pro Football Central listeners can get 10% off of Onnit's products by going to Onnit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio. And we have a new sponsor this week, Bonita Tequila. If you like tequila, this is the tequila for you. A luxury brand of tequila, excuse me, I am from New England, tequila, owned in part by hip-hop artist Exhibit, produced in Mexico, and it's made from 100% blue agave. So Bonita Tequila, ask for that next time you go to the bar for a drink. So before we have BJ Kissel in here, we got to talk about the breaking news, the breaking Pittsburgh Steelers news this week. Steelers second-round draft pick Le'Veon Bell, running back. He is going to be out, according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, he's going to be out up to 6 weeks. He has a small ligament tear in his right foot. He injured his right foot Monday night against the Redskins after carrying the ball 4 times for 9 yards. It was a much anticipated debut for the rookie running back Monday night. He missed the first preseason game because of a nagging knee injury. Then when it finally seemed like the knee injury was behind him, he goes out and hurts his foot in the first quarter, and it looks like he's going to be missing the first month of the season. And a lot is really riding on Le'Veon Bell's shoulders because they really needed Bell to revive their running game. And it kind of leads me to wonder if history is repeating itself here as far as the Steelers' drafting of running backs. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette pointed out today that the Steelers drafted Bell in the second round back in April, 7 spots before the Green Bay Packers drafted Eddie Lacy. And the Steelers stayed away from Eddie Lacy because of injury concerns. And they picked Le'Veon Bell instead because he's more durable, more of a workhorse. Guess what? Eddie Lacy on Saturday night in his debut against the St. Louis Rams gained 40 yards on 8 carries. That's 5 yards a carry in his preseason debut. Now Le'Veon Bell is on the shelf, so it's way too early to say that the Steelers made the wrong decision drafting Le'Veon Bell, but right now it's not looking too good. And the reason why I think that, or I'm concerned that history is repeating itself, is because in 2008, the Steelers drafted Rashard Mendenhall in the first round. That was the last time they really made an investment with a high round draft pick on a running back. Then in the second round, the Steelers drafted wide receiver Limas Sweed from Texas. And then 2 picks later, the Baltimore Ravens drafted Ray Rice. I'd rather have Ray Rice than Limas Sweed, who was a classic bust. You look up NFL draft bust in the dictionary, Limas Sweed's mugshot is right there. But the Steelers had 2 opportunities to pick Ray Rice in that 2008 draft, and they whiffed both times because they picked Mendenhall in the first round. If they had the Steelers chosen Ray Rice in the first round of that 2008 draft, that now in hindsight, 5 years later, that would have looked like a very good draft pick, even in the first round. Rice was chosen in the second round. That turned out to be a very valuable pick for the Baltimore Ravens. But last year, Jonathan Dwyer led Steelers running. He was the Steelers' leading rusher in 2012 with 623 rushing yards. It was the lowest total for a Steelers' leading rusher since Merrill Hodge gained 610 yards back in 1991. So that's why the Steelers used a second-round draft pick on Le'Veon Bell, the Big Ten's leading rusher. So now this happens. Now Bell's hurt, and Steelers are going to have to fall back on what they had last year with Jonathan Dwyer and or Isaac Redman leading the way. Now, Jonathan Dwyer has a chip on his shoulder. Ed Bouchette of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette wrote him off. I wrote him off. He tweets that he's out there. He's gonna prove everybody wrong, including Ed Bouchette. Well, hopefully that chip on his shoulder is enough. It's enough of a motivation to keep the Steelers' running game acceptable or respectable until Le'Veon Bell comes back. And Isaac Redman was listed as a co-starter on the depth chart with Le'Veon Bell before Bell got hurt, but Redman missed the preseason game on Monday because he was injured. But Jonathan Dwyer went and gained 14 carries, gained 68 yards. So he might be a little bit ahead of Isaac Redman in the pecking order right now. So as long as Dwyer stays in shape, he might be a little bit more athletic than Isaac Redman. And just a little closing thought on this before we go into our break is I wonder how many people would have complained about the Steelers' running game last year if Ben Roethlisberger and Ike Taylor had stayed healthy the entire season. We have BJ Kissel coming up after this.
Football fans, check out the official t-shirt apparel shop for the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Check out bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. You think it, we ink it. They have an awesome 24-hour turnaround time. You can also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45255. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
This is Michael Johnson. This is David Nelson. This is Rob McClain. This is Antonio Gray.
This is Antonio Brown.
Hi, this is Kyle Rudolph.
On the Pro Football Central Radio Network.
We are here with BJ Kissel, a featured columnist for Bleacher Report here on Black and Gold Central. Welcome to Black and Gold Central, BJ.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I mentioned you as a Bleacher Report featured columnist. Is that so you're an NFL featured columnist on Bleacher Report?
Yes, I'm a featured NFL columnist for them, and then I also work full-time job logistics coordinator for a media group. I also do cover some events for them, some college football writing, and some other events as well.
Okay, great. And you also wrote for Arrowhead Pride?
Yeah, I actually got my start at Arrowhead Pride with SB Nation. I spent about a year and a half with them. I hosted their it was called Chop Talk. It was their radio podcast each week. I ran and hosted their YouTube channel for about a year, and then I went down and I covered the Senior Bowl in Mobile at the end of January for them, and then it was about April I started with Bleacher Report.
Okay, I just got that. I was looking over your stuff, BJ, and I saw you worked for Chop Talk, and I'm like, okay, I wonder what that's about. Like, oh yeah, the chop that the Chiefs fans do. I get it now.
Yeah, it's the best name we could come up with.
So the Steelers play the Chiefs on Saturday night at 7:30 at Heinz Field in Week 3 of the preseason. So a lot of people, BJ, are saying that the Chiefs, they went 2-14 last year, but they had 6 Pro Bowlers. So there are a lot of those people who are saying that the Chiefs can rebuild and get good pretty quickly, maybe even make the playoffs. Do you buy all that?
I don't know about the playoffs just because there's a pretty good quarterback over in Denver, and I think that we start throwing playoffs around when you've got a Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe a top 5, and we'll get into that argument, but top 5, top 3, top 10, whatever you want to call it, best quarterbacks of all time in Peyton Manning. It's tough to start throwing around the playoffs word. I do think they're going to be better. I think probably every 2-4 team in NFL history will tell you that they don't feel like they were a 2-14 team. And you bring up the Pro Bowls. I think there's a lot of talent on the team. There was talent on the team last year. I kind of hesitate to use the Pro Bowls as a defense for the amount of talent, because a lot of times the Pro Bowl is a popularity contest, and it's nothing to put down the Chiefs that made it last year. I think that there are some young guys that are starting to get their due, Justin Houston being one of them. And I think with last year, I think it was just Romeo Crennel, the hiring to bring him in as head coach, would just crash and burn. It was just, it didn't work. I think that, I don't know how good they would have been with Matt Castle at quarterback if there would have been a different coach. I don't think that Matt Castle not ever beating a winning team, or I think he beat just one winning team in his few years in Kansas City. So I don't know if they were quite a 2-14 team last year as far as the talent level, but I would be, happy with an 8-8 season, see them, quadruple their win total from last year.
What's your feeling on Alex Smith as your quarterback, as the Chiefs quarterback, I should say?
I think Alex Smith is what Chiefs fans are hoping Matt Castle would have become. I don't think, anybody's expecting him to go out there and be a top 5 quarterback. And with a team that's, built to run with Jamal Charles, we know where the strength of the team is. I think as long as he can come out there and not turn the ball over, that was the one thing that going into last year we were all talking about. We talked about it on Shop Talk every week, was that all Matt Castle had to do was not turn the ball over. And once the season started, it was about the only thing he could do. I mean, every time he threw the ball, either whether it was his fault or it bounced off a receiver's hands and, end up as an interception, or fumbling the ball on the goal line on first down, like the first game of the season or second game of the season against Baltimore. I mean, it almost became laughable how many times the ball was getting turned over with Castle, and then he went down and Brady Quinn stepped up. So, and not a lot, it wasn't a whole lot different when he got there. So I think that there's optimism around Alex Smith just because of what we saw last year with the quarterback situation. I don't think any right-minded fan is expecting to go out there and, turn into Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or any of those elite quarterbacks. But I think that as long as he can throw the accurate, throw the underneath passes accurately, it's something where Chiefs fans were joking after the first couple of preseason games when you'd see, just a swing pass to a running back, or just a drag across the line of scrimmage where, there'd be an accurate pass and Dexter McCluster or whoever would have been catching the passes, picked up 5 or 6 yards. And, all of a sudden Chiefs fans are saying, finally we got a quarterback. And it's like, because he can complete, a 2-yard pass down the field accurately, because Matt Castle couldn't do that. He would burn it in there, and, he would throw it as hard as he could, and there was every throw he made had the same velocity, the same trajectory on it. So when you finally see a quarterback completing these short passes and, leading receivers throwing so they're not breaking stride, it kind of tells you where we were at in our quarterback situation last year, and that's what's getting excited about this year. But I think that Alex Smith's going to be good enough to move the ball, hopefully not make the mistakes that put the defense in a bad spot. But I think the team's going to rely on its defense and obviously going to rely on Jamal Charles a lot.
Okay, BJ. Now, say Todd Haley is still the Chiefs coach last year. Do they still go 2-14?
That's a great question. I don't know if they would have gone 2-14 just because, when you have my favorite example of Romeo Crennel last year was after the Raiders game where Jamal Charles, who wasn't injured, only carried the ball 4 times in a home walk. It was the home walk through the Raiders. And in the post-game press conference, one of the reporters asked Romeo Crennel, why did Jamal Charles only carry the ball 4 times? And his answer was, I don't know. I think there was a miscommunication somewhere. And granted, Crennel was honest to a fault. He was a very nice guy. The players liked him. They thought of him as like a father figure. But when your best player on your team only touches the ball 4 times with a quarterback who literally couldn't complete 2-yard passes very often without throwing it as hard as he could, or throwing it 6 feet high to Dexter McCluster and having McCluster dislocate his elbow last year. But to answer your question, I think they probably would have had a few more wins. But the Todd Haley and Scott Pioli were not getting along, and it was rumored, even in training camp last year or 2 years ago, that they weren't getting along, and it was not a good situation. So I'm not sure. It definitely would have been interesting to see how those two would have gotten along for another year, considering how just tenuous it got towards the end of their reign. But I would say that they would have got a few more wins, but I don't think you would have been looking at a 500 team either way.
Yeah, it seems Todd Haley can rub people the wrong way and get into some personality conflicts in Pittsburgh. He's going into his second year as offensive coordinator, and he's obviously has his place in the hierarchy here. The big issue right now is just the Steelers are just hoping that there's more familiarity with Haley's offense going into the second year. But would you say, based on what you saw in Kansas City, that at some point, there might be some sort of blow up or some sort of conflict with Todd Haley and somebody else in the Steelers organization at some point?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think Haley's biggest problem, and this is just my personal opinion, I think Haley's biggest problem was the way he talked with veteran players, and I don't follow too closely with what Haley's been doing down in Pittsburgh. I think initially there were some reports that him and Roethlisberger weren't seeing eye to eye on some things, and maybe that's still continuing, I'm not sure. But one of the first, and probably the best example, one of the first pieces of news that came out that showed Haley really wasn't either playing favoritism or that he had a certain way about him with veteran players. There was a report that Brian Waters, one of the longtime offensive linemen for the Chiefs and one of the more storied guys, in Chiefs history, especially along the offensive line. He was a veteran at the time, and he had gone up to Haley right after he had gotten hired. And there was a comment that, two guys, I think Brian Waters tried to have a meeting with him, and Haley's comment, he wouldn't see him, and Haley's comment was, I can pick, 25 guys off the street and they can go win 2 games. And that was the quote that kind of followed Haley around, especially towards the end of his tenure there, that was just kind of showing that, not that he has to treat veterans differently, but I don't know if some of the veteran players, and this is my personal opinion, I don't know if some of the players looked at Haley as having the kind of pedigree that would allow him to talk to veteran players like that. I think if you're a coach who's been in the league for 20 years and had a lot of success, that you can talk to veteran players and not belittle them, but or talk down to them, but just kind of have a firm way with them. I think that if you've got that pedigree, the players may listen. And like I said, it's just my opinion. But as far as his blow up, he's a hothead. There were a lot of times on the sideline where they'd show things, and granted, we're not naive to think that, those things don't happen with all the other coaches behind the scenes, but, there was some public on the sideline between, Castle and Haley during this time, and then all the rumors of Haley and Pioli not getting along. I think it kind of blew back, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear, every once in a while, especially if things aren't going too well, of any kind of, blow up between, Haley and any front office staff members. But, with Haley's dad having such a long history with the Steelers, I think that, there's a comfortability factor with Haley. And I think that even if it was some sort of blow up, that it all kind of passes over. That's just his personality. And I think they would all know that. And these people, they spend so much time behind the scenes together that when there is a blow up, we don't know necessarily 5 minutes later if they're not making up or if these things don't happen quite a bit because he's passionate about what he's doing. So I wouldn't look too much into anything like that unless it becomes something that's consistently happening week after week.
Okay, we got time for one more quick question and answer, BJ. You had the Chiefs going at about 8-8 this year. Would you say the Steelers are better than that or worse than that in 2013?
Oh man, putting me on the spot.
You are an NFL columnist, so since you follow league wide, I figured it might be a good question.
Yeah, I think that you can't ever count the Steelers out. They've got the quarterback. Obviously, it all points back to the quarterback. Obviously, there's going to be some changes. I think Sanders and some of those other guys on the offensive side will step up now that Wallace is gone. I don't think the recent news of Bell being out 6 to 8 weeks is necessarily going to be helpful. And obviously the conference, the division you guys play in is pretty good. I think Cleveland's going to be a lot better than people are expecting, at least from a national perspective. But anytime you've got a quarterback, you've got a chance. And obviously you guys have a pretty good one. So I wouldn't put Pittsburgh down as the favorite to win the division. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if Pittsburgh ended up with a better record than the Chiefs this year.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, BJ. And enjoy the game Saturday night and enjoy the 2013 NFL season.
All right, you guys too.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
Welcome back to Black and Gold Central here on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. That was BJ Kissel, NFL featured columnist on Bleacher Report. We want to thank him for coming on our show. Now, we're going to talk about 5 studs and 5 duds from Monday night's preseason game against the Washington Redskins. 5 studs and duds for the Steelers. They lost 24-13 in their Week 2 preseason game Monday night in Washington. Now, I believe it or not, I do have 5 studs here. We kind of had to sift through the wreckage to come up with these, but I do have 5 studs, and we are going to go over them first. First one is Jarvis Jones, the Steelers' first-round draft pick. Didn't do much in the first preseason game, but on Monday he had 2 tackles, and he forced a fumble. So he's making the type of progress that you would expect a rookie to make. At least right now, it seems there's no reason to really be worried about Jarvis Jones's progress. Second stud, we have Shamarko Thomas, the Steelers' 4th-round draft pick in April, safety. He was the Steelers' leading tackler Monday night. He had 4 tackles, and he forced a fumble. And on just about every play that he was in there, he always seemed to be around the football. Very encouraging sign there for Shamarko Thomas, who he could work his way into number 3 on the safety depth chart as being the primary backup for both Ryan Clark and Troy Polamalu as a rookie. Number 3 stud, Brian Arnfelt. Undrafted free agent this year from Northwestern. He had 2 tackles in the second half. One of those tackles went for a loss. Arnfelt, if you're asking who? Brian who? Well, he was number 69 If you DVR'd the game, check out the second half. Definitely made his presence felt. And one thing about Arnfeldt is there's a great opportunity for him to be the Steelers' best number 69 of all time, in my opinion. On Facebook and Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter on Steel Tweets. And you can follow you can like Respect the Towel on Facebook. But I've been counting down the days until the Steelers' opening day, and for every number of days that are left, I'm choosing the Steelers' best player of all time at that uniform number. You know who I had at 69? Ariel Solomon, offensive lineman, 1991 to 1995. As I wrote, versatile backup and special teamer. Got into every game for the Steelers playoff teams in 1993 and 1994. It was kind of slim pickings at number 69. So Arnfeldt, I would think he at least will get on the Steelers practice squad if he doesn't make the team. But I would put him down for a practice squad position. Speaking of people who might end up on the practice squad, my fourth stud from Monday is Terry Hawthorne. 5th round draft pick this year. He's a cornerback. He missed a lot of the Steelers spring practices because he's been injured. But he had a fumble recovery on Monday night. And he played a lot on special teams. So the Steelers shouldn't. He's behind because of the time he's missed with injuries, but definitely keep an eye on him. Carnell Lake, the Steelers defensive backs coach, in the spring, he said that there's a lot of technique things with Terry Hawthorne that need to be corrected. So it's going to be interesting to see how he comes along. The Steelers don't need much from him now, but Ike Taylor's not getting any younger. I think he's 34, so the Steelers are definitely going to need some reinforcements at cornerback. And my 5th stud from the Steelers preseason game against the Redskins is Terrence Garvin, an undrafted free agent from West Virginia. Number 49. He had 2 tackles on punt returns and 2 tackles on defense in the 4th quarter. So those are the 5 studs from Monday. Lamar Woodley, you might say, well, what about Lamar Woodley? He had a sack. But that's what he's supposed to do, so he's not going to make the studs list. Jonathan Dwyer would have been one of these studs except for his fumble. And rookie 3rd round pick, wide receiver Marcus Wheaton, had a good game. He caught 3 passes for 52 yards, including 1 for 45. But he really made a rookie mistake in the 4th quarter. On his 3rd reception, he tried to reverse field, and it ended up going for no gain. Rookie mistake there is what keeps him off of the studs list. Now the duds. Now you could say the entire offensive line is one of the duds, but I'm going to pick out 2 people in particular who deserve special attention as duds. Number 1, Marquise Pouncey. Now, he had a lot of problems with Redskins nose tackle Barry Cofield. And it got me thinking. Now, this is very preliminary, but Pouncey he's 304 pounds. He can get overpowered by big nose tackles. And it makes me wonder, he did okay. He did fine against the Giants, but they're a 4-3 team. The Redskins are a 3-4 team. They had that big nose tackle there, and it kind of got me wondering, is Pouncey better off playing against a 4-3 defense where he doesn't have to deal with that big mountain of a nose tackle? Just something to keep an eye on going forward. The number 2 dud, from Monday night, Kelvin Beachum. He played a lot of left tackle on Monday night. And in my opinion, he gets a failing grade. It seemed like guys were always getting past him. Now, everybody seems to like Kelvin Beachum. because he can be, supposedly he's versatile. He can be a backup at every position. I don't think he should be a backup at left tackle. I think let's narrow it down to 4 positions that Kelvin Beachum can be a backup at, or can be the number 2 guy at, because he was very unimpressive at left tackle on Monday night, in my opinion. If anybody out there is really a film study guru and is better at the X's and O's than me, and that you want to disagree with me, be my guest. Enlighten me. But from what I saw, I thought Beachum was awful at left tackle on Monday night against the Redskins. And he should not be the first substitute at left tackle during the season. And it's kind of funny. Obviously, the Steelers' entire offensive line was terrible on Monday night. One thing I noticed against the Giants, Ben Roethlisberger was sacked once. But there was one other time when he was knocked down, and when he was knocked down, every offensive lineman went right up to him and made sure he's okay. Oh, are you okay? Are you okay? It's like he was Roethlisberger was relatively unscathed in the first preseason game. So the one time that he did get knocked down, everybody's, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? They didn't bother doing that on Monday night. Roethlisberger was running for his life, and the offensive linemen had their own problems. So there was no, are you okay? Are you okay? Every time that Roethlisberger was knocked down, because if that happened, they probably would have gotten flagged for a delay of game. Speaking of Ben Roethlisberger, he's another dud from Monday night because of the interception that he threw to Ryan Kerrigan, that Kerrigan returned for a touchdown. Sort of an interception that he threw in the flat there. He was trying to get, Roethlisberger was trying to throw to Jonathan Dwyer. Kerrigan was working against right tackle Marcus Gilbert on that play, and he really was in the passing lane. And Roethlisberger just should not have thrown that pass. He should have gone to a secondary read. It just seemed like he was pre-programmed to throw that pass. It didn't matter that Ryan Kerrigan could jump up and snatch that ball out of the air. Should have held on to the ball and thrown to somebody else. I think that interception was on Roethlisberger. And it's kind of a habit that he has. He threw an interception to Terrell Suggs in a similar situation when the Ravens played at Heinz Field in 2011, and the Ravens ended up winning that game. And that game cost the Steelers home field advantage. It ultimately cost the Steelers the division and a first-round bye in the playoffs. Forced the Steelers to go to Denver for the wild card game. We know how that turned out. Speaking of quarterbacks, the number 4 dud from Monday night is Landry Jones. Yes, he threw a touchdown pass. He finally got that monkey off his back, but he was only 9 for 22. And he got away with a couple of interceptions. There were 2 balls that should have been interceptions, but Redskins defenders dropped them. And that brings me to my last dud from Monday night, and that's rookie wide receiver Justin Brown. He was beat by the Redskins defensive back on one pass that should have been picked off, and he dropped another pass. Not a great game from Justin Brown, the 6th-round draft pick, trying to earn a spot on the team as the 5th receiver. I want to see a lot more J.D. Woods Saturday night when the Steelers play the Chiefs in preseason week 3. He's been my dark horse candidate pretty much throughout the spring and summer to be that 5th receiver. And I hope we see a lot of number 17 against the Chiefs. Now, the 3rd preseason game is traditionally the game where the starters see the most action. They play a half. They play in pretty much the entire first half, and it's the preseason game that most simulates a regular season game. Now, according to the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, the Steelers have had only 2 losing preseasons in the last 10 years, and they came in 2003 when they went when they went 1-3, and in 2006 when they went 0-4. The Steelers missed the playoffs both of those seasons. Now, obviously, Monday night's preseason performance against the Redskins was a bad one. Offensive line was terrible. The only bright spot really was the Steelers' first team defense. Because remember, the first 7 points the Redskins scored, they were not scored on the Steelers' defense. So obviously, it's a preseason game, though. They lost 24-13. It was an all-around bad performance for the Steelers, but it doesn't count in the standings. But it does concern you a little bit, even though preseason games don't count, that their 2 worst preseason performances, or their 2 worst preseason records over the last 10 years, came in seasons in which they did not make the playoffs. And since he became head coach in 2007, Mike Tomlin has never lost more than 1 preseason game. The Steelers are already 0-2 in this preseason. So it makes you think a little bit. And here's one line from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review that I got to share with you. Saying, Saturday is one of the most important preseason games of Tomlin's tenure. Now, I know there are a lot of things the Steelers need to fix, but that's being a little bit melodramatic. Last time I checked, preseason games don't figure into tiebreakers. I don't think the Steelers are going to be mathematically eliminated if they lose to the Chiefs on Saturday night. I don't think they're going to have to rely on other teams to beat other teams and to do any scoreboard watching if they lose to the Chiefs on Saturday and fall to 0-3 in the preseason. Let's not forget last year in that all-important 3rd preseason game, the preseason game that resembles the regular season more than anything else. Last year, the Steelers beat the Bills 38-7 at Buffalo. Going on the road against a weak team and winning by 31 points. That's what championship teams do. That's what championship teams do, right? Everything looked hunky-dory last year. After the 3rd preseason game, the Steelers go to Buffalo, win 38-7. Then look what happened. They go 8-8, and they miss the playoffs. So there are some things we want to watch for as on Saturday night. As I said, I'd like to see more J.D. Woods. I'd like to see more of Joe Long, offensive lineman, who didn't get into the first preseason game. He did get into the preseason game on Monday. And he was so-so. He got beat on a couple of plays, but I'd like to see him get more extended work. Obviously, it's going to be in the second half because quite likely the Steelers starters are going to play the entire first half, and depending on if they need the work, we might even see them into the 3rd quarter. Let's just hope nobody gets hurt, because really that's all that counts in the preseason. Now, next week's going to be a hot show because we'll be back on next Thursday. And the last preseason game is next Thursday night at Carolina. That's next Thursday, August 29th. So we will have a preseason show, a preseason game to talk about. That'll be just hours away from the time that we're on the air next Thursday. It's going to kind of feel like the last day of school. We all can't wait for the regular season to start, and I think the players feel the same way too. The 4th preseason game, the starters hardly are going to play at all. So for football fans and for football NFL players, that last preseason game kind of feels like the last day of school, even though these kids across the country are just going to be starting school. So I'm glad I don't have to deal with going back to school. I'm glad I'm grown up. Well, sort of grown up. At least that's what my birth certificate says. So we'll have that to look forward to. We'll be talking a little bit about the Steelers' last preseason game. We'll probably focus on some position battles that need to be worked out. By next week, by August 27th, the Steelers will need to narrow their roster down to 75 players. So cuts are going to be coming next week. There's going to be some cuts, and we can talk about some of the players who were cut. And we can, as I said, talk about some of the remaining position battles next week. And I'm just trying to think of some players right now who are on the team who look like they are candidates to be cut. Going over the Steelers roster here, I would say, I don't know about Isaiah Green. He seemed to show up pretty well. He seemed to be visible on the screen a little bit, the Steelers cornerback, so he might get another chance. I don't know about some of these receivers. Derek Moy, he caught the touchdown pass. David Gilreath, I think he needs to show something. I think he needs to show something on Saturday to save his job and to make the 75-man roster. He's number 18, Steelers wide receiver. Baron Batch, I don't know. I think Baron Batch is safe for a little while because of the injury to Le'Veon Bell. Justin Cheadle, number 72. Not sure about him. He could end up being cut. I don't know. Guy Wimper, he had a pretty bad game on Monday. He could be on the chopping block for roster cuts. And who else do we have here? Let's see what we have here. If we can just, we're going to go. Let's just take a look on NFL.com here on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, just to, as I said, I think Brian Arnfelt, unless he really has a bad game Saturday, is going to stick around. I think Reggie Dunn's going to get every chance to make this team. I think the Steelers really want to see him get on this team as a kick return specialist, so I don't think he's going to be, I think he'll survive the roster cut to 75 players. Mike Farrell, number 71, undrafted free agent, offensive lineman from Penn State. Haven't seen much from him. He could end up getting cut. Mike Golick, too, another offensive lineman. He might not survive cut down day next Tuesday. We've already talked about Isaiah Green, although I think he might survive. Christopher Hubbard, offensive lineman, undrafted free agent from Alabama Birmingham. He's on the bubble. Joe Long, he's going to be on the bubble too. You know, I'd like to see him get a long look on Saturday, though. Joe Long is, actually, he spent some time on some practice squads last year, so he's not a rookie. Joe Madsen, center, from West Virginia, undrafted free agent. I predict he'll get cut. Haven't seen much from him. Look at this. I'm only at the M's here, alphabetically on the roster. Kashif Moore, wide receiver from Connecticut. Another guy on the bubble. Nathan Overbay and Michael Palmer, maybe they survive because they're tight ends and the Steelers are so thin at that position. Although David Johnson came off the physically unable to perform list this week. after missing all of last year with an ACL injury. Devin Smith had an interception. He's a cornerback from Wisconsin. He had an interception, but I still think he needs to do something on Saturday night to keep his job, because I haven't really heard much from him during camp. Ryan Steed, a cornerback, he's another Ryan Who kind of guy. He might not make it. Tight end, number 47, Peter I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. Tuitupou, undrafted from San Jose State. He hasn't done much. He'll probably get cut next Tuesday. Ross Ventrone, a safety, number 41, trying to grow his hair like Troy Polamalu. He missed a couple of tackles on special teams on Saturday, so he could be cut. I think Josh Victorian will get a chance and he'll survive. He'll be part of the 75, but I don't think, I definitely no guarantee that cornerback will make the 53-man roster. Nick Williams, 7th round draft pick, the defensive tackle. He had a sack on Monday. I think the Steelers would like to get him on the practice squad, so he'll survive the first cut, I think. Number 44, Vince Williams, inside linebacker, 1st round draft pick. Another guy I think the Steelers would at least like to see get on the practice squad. Linebacker Keon Wilson, number 48. He's another guy on the bubble. So that rounds it out. Kind of went through the Steelers roster alphabetically. So next week, we can talk about the Steelers' final preseason game. We can talk about the position battles. You can follow Black and Gold Central on BNG Central. Follow us on Twitter. If you have any questions for us, if you want us to talk about anything, don't be afraid to follow us and drop us a line there on Twitter, Black and Gold Central, BNG Central. You can follow me on Steel Tweets. That's Steel_tweets. As always, Black and Gold Central is sponsored by Onnit, ONNIT.com. Get 10% off by going to onnit.com, football radio. And, of course, we have welcomed our new sponsor, Bonita Tequila. So we have a lot to talk about next week, and we have a lot of football, and a lot will be going on between now and then. So we'll see you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.